Hi, and welcome to Talking with Myself, the podcast where I, Megan, literally do just that. This week's episode is called Comfort in My Own Company, and this is one about learning to be alone without feeling lonely, to sit with yourself without immediately reaching for distraction, and why that might matter more than we realize. Feel free to listen in and notice if anything resonates. I have come to love solo dates. And I used to think it was something you only did when you had no other options, like when everyone else was busy. But now I actually encourage it. It can be very, very simple. It could be sitting alone at a coffee shop, working from a restaurant if your job allows it. It could be taking yourself to the cinema, maybe book shopping, having a little self care night in, or doing hobbies wherever they may take place. It's not necessarily about the solo dates. It's more about learning to enjoy your own company. It's not just doing my own thing while other people are around, but being completely alone without distraction and working through the discomfort that sometimes comes with that. That is what I want to talk about. That is what it truly means to learn to enjoy solitude. And that's the heart of this episode. As a child, when I wasn't talking the heads off of my family members, I was actually very capable of entertaining myself. I really loved arts and crafts. Sticky tape and cardboard were my best friends. I could always easily do my own thing while others were around, but trying to do the same activities knowing I was completely alone, that felt very different. And it was only something that I really started to notice in the recent years. At first, I would tell myself I was probably feeling FOMO, like I was missing out on what others were doing somewhere else. But eventually, I realized it wasn't really a fear of missing out. I was just uncomfortable with solitude. And I only really saw that once I was forced into it. So during my undergrad years, certain plans went a little bit skew, and I ended up living alone in my apartment for a few months. Now, look, I was not exactly disconnected from the world. I had and still have a very committed partner and loving friends and family. I've always been blessed with a strong support system. But physically being alone in that space day after day, where the only sort of interactions I was having was on campus, and I fell into quite a routine of back and forth just between my apartment and campus. That physically being alone in my space brought up certain things that I hadn't expected. And I'll admit it was uncomfortable. I'd prefer to, stay and work on campus just so that I wouldn't have to go and do the same things at home. Being completely alone in my space brought up unexpected insecurities, thoughts I hadn't really sat with before. But that's maybe a topic for a different conversation. Anyways, I realized I'd been avoiding that type of stillness. And at some point, I made a quiet decision. Instead of labeling that season as lonely, I started reframing it as an opportunity to get to know myself better, to start dealing with my insecurities instead of running away, and to understand that change and growth start with a bit of discomfort, to trust that this experience would be good for me in the long run. Then something shifted. I no longer saw solitude as a problem to be fixed, but more as space. And just as a side note, I have since moved back home closer to family and friends, and I've actually moved in with my boyfriend, but I am still incredibly grateful for that experience. When you become comfortable with being alone, being with others becomes more of an intentional choice. We're human. We are naturally social creatures, but being intentional with your social interactions makes them so much more meaningful. You choose people because they add meaning to your life, not because you're trying to fill silence. Now, this distinction changed a lot for me. And I don't say that to suggest the people in my life were ever distractions. They weren't. They are and always have been deeply important to me. This was about my internal experience, not about their value. Solitude has also helped me to understand boundaries in a deeper way. When you spend time alone, you start noticing what drains you and what energizes you. You learn to choose interactions and connections from a place of self respect and alignment. Somewhere along the way, I started adding small rituals to my alone time. I'd light candles at dinner sometimes, even if it was just me, or I'd sing and I'd dance to music while I was cooking. I'd sometimes get a coffee before going grocery shopping. It's less about making things aesthetic and more about deciding that your presence is worth something. Lol, that just made me think of that L'Oreal Paris slogan, because you're worth it. It is true though. It's about refusing to postpone living until there's a special occasion. And it's about romanticizing ordinary moments because I can be enough company for myself sometimes too. Now, through studying psychology, I've become more aware of how much we value autonomy, our ability to act from genuine choice rather than things like pressure or fear or habit. Solitude, when chosen, can really strengthen our sense of autonomy. And psychology also tells us a lot about the attachment styles that develop during childhood and that go on to shape our adult lives. It's a lot about how safe or unsafe we feel in connection and sometimes in solitude as well. I've also noticed something very practical. When I allowed myself to be alone, I would sometimes think more clearly. I'd feel calmer and I'd enter a sort of flow state that didn't happen when I'd surround myself with noise and distractions. And I found this particularly helpful while studying. It also gives my nervous system space to settle, and it gives me more energy for the people I love. This is, commonly known as our social battery. Spending time alone, overcoming the discomfort has helped me to show up better for myself and for the important people in my life. And I find this particularly important when it comes to having life partners, but I believe it still holds value for friends and family members as well. Solitude also creates space for self discovery. Without a pressure to behave in a certain way, you begin to notice what you actually enjoy, not what is loud or extreme, not what's trendy, but what feels true to you. Now, of course, solitude feels different for everyone. If being alone has ever felt unsafe for you, then this conversation might land differently, and that makes sense. For some people, especially those who may have experienced neglect or extreme instability while growing up, solitude can bring up fear or distress rather than calm. And in those cases, it's not about romanticizing your life, it's about establishing safety first. But I do want to say, even then, it is possible, slowly and gently, to build new experiences around being alone, ones that can heal old wounds. In psychology, this is often called corrective emotional experiences. And I want to make it clear, you're not broken if being alone is hard, but it's something that can be worked with over time. If you're wanting to build a better relationship with solitude, start small. Maybe begin by reframing the language. Don't say, oh, I'm alone. Rather say, I have time for myself. You don't have to hide away in a cabin for a weekend. I mean, unless you want to. I'd probably say go for it, but that's just because I'm optimistic when it comes to ideas like that. But it could really be as simple as drinking your coffee without scrolling on your phone. It could be maybe going for a short walk and simply listening to the sounds around you, or maybe sitting through the first few minutes of discomfort instead of immediately finding a way to fill the silence. And be mindful of what you use during your me time. It's okay to use technology, there's no rule against it, but try balancing screens and social media with more tangible offline activities. Play with art mediums, draw, paint, build a puzzle, journal, tend to plants, read. I am an avid reader, so that is why I say it with so much vigor. And please prepare yourself because I will probably mention reading a lot and I will not be apologizing for it every time. So consider this my official and absolute apology, although I love reading and I don't feel bad about that. So I probably don't need to apologize in the first place. Anyways, moving on. I would really say to create a space that feels grounding. I've learned that where I spend my time matters just as much as how I spend it. And a space that feels calm, secure, and truly your own really changes how you experience your solitude. And lastly, listen to what your mind and body are asking for. Sometimes I really love to listen to music or watch a YouTube video while I'm busy in the kitchen. It could be cooking, it could be doing dishes, whatever. Other times, I've noticed an intuitive pull towards silence. And I've learned not to ignore that because often that intuition was right about what I needed in that moment. What I want to leave here is that learning to enjoy your own company isn't about isolation. It's about the beginning of knowing yourself more honestly. It's a great start to your journey of personal growth. There is a time to spend with others, and there is time to spend with yourself. Both matter, both are healthy, and both are necessary. Thank you so much for listening in. I hope something stayed with you. If not, that's okay too. Please feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts on this episode or if there's something you'd like to hear more about. And I hope you'll tune in for the next one. Bye.